honored that you are giving a speech to us.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, MEPs. Well, I don't know. First, let me most sincerely show my gratitude and thank you for opportunity of being part of your section. It was a very good listen how discussions go on. The first question people wonder is, why am I here? I'm just here to be able to start a conversation because I found out that the European Union, or most countries of Europe and the Western world, actually have little knowledge about Nigeria and Africa in general. And because of it, in their decision, in their thinking, they rarely bring Africa into perspective. I said to them, it is time to rethink. Africa today is the last frontier of global development. It's the second biggest continent in terms of size in the world, the second biggest continent in terms of population. It's a continent that has the highest amount of natural resources. It's a continent that has vast uncultivated land, a continent with young population. 60% of African population today is young. But then it's a continent of mass poverty. Today, Europe, if I take Nigeria for example, Nigeria in terms of population is 50% of European Union population. You are about 450 million. We are over 240 million. So we over have 50% of your population. In terms of the land size, Nigeria, Europe is about 4-point-something million square kilometers. Nigeria is about a quarter of that. Just Nigeria. But when you come to in terms of wealth, while Europe have a per capita of over $40,000, Nigeria, which is over 50% of your population, our per capita is below about 2.5% of that of Europe. So you could see the potential, with all the resources, the potential for growth. The nearest continent to Africa, to Nigeria, is Europe. So if Africa today turns around, the biggest beneficiary will be Europe. If it collapses, the consequence will affect you more. And I believe that we have so many commonalities that we can work together and everything. And what is the problem of Africa? The problem of Africa remains leadership. To have a political leadership that is competent, that have the capacity, compassion, commitment, and character to be able to deal with issues of corruption, law and order, focus on investing in critical areas of development, which is health, education, and pulling people out of poverty. It was discussed here that we have issue of killings, which again, people can say is genocide, people can say is Muslim versus Christians and everything. Are there killings? Are there criminality? Are there kidnapping? Yes. But we have to look at the issues that are driving this. When you have a huge population, for example, Nigeria have over 100 million people living in multidimensional poverty. You have millions of out-of-school children, or those who didn't go to school at all. With mass poverty and mass uneducated people, you have room for easy recruitment for all forms of criminality, which which is what is now driving us of killings that we need to deal with. And now we're moving around. I'm moving around and saying, we need support. We need you to help us to overcome this and be able to create a clear developing environment that will also benefit you, because it's a huge market for you. It's a huge advantage in terms of resources and everything if Africa, especially Nigeria, is doing well. It's the most populous country in Africa. It's about 1/6 of African population is Nigeria. And it has all it takes to be a huge market that Europe, just like Africa, can have. And to turn around Africa, you must turn around Nigeria. Because it's a country that will drive the rest of Africa. To develop Africa, which will benefit you, you must start from Nigeria. So that's where I came to continue to start the conversation with you. Is not something, of course, I can take on tonight. It's something that I know that it requires several visits to be able to intimate you more on this commitment, on this trajectory that I want you to go down with us and be able to help us to turn around Africa, Nigeria in particular. So thank you for the opportunity of having a few minutes conversation with you. Maybe there'll be questions.
Thank you very much. I have a question, because after that we will also have a discussion about...
Peter Obi walks into European Parliament and says what no African leader dares to say. There are moments in global diplomacy when a voice cuts through the noise of protocol and speaks with the kind of raw clarity that makes everyone in the room sit up straight. Peter Obi, Nigeria's former Anambra State governor and 2023 presidential candidate, delivered one of those moments when he addressed members of the European Parliament. What he said was not diplomatic small talk. It was a challenge, a diagnosis, and an appeal, all wrapped in less than 10 minutes of plain, unvarnished truth. He opened by asking the question he knew every lawmaker in that chamber was silently thinking. Why is he here? His answer was disarming in its honesty. He was there, he said, because Europe and the Western world know very little about Nigeria and Africa in general. And because of that ignorance, Africa is routinely left out of the strategic calculations that shape global policy. Then came the line that framed everything that followed. He looked at those parliamentarians and told them directly, "It is time to rethink." He laid out the case with the precision of a man who has spent decades studying numbers and their human consequences. Africa is the second largest continent on Earth by size, the second most populous, the continent with the highest concentration of natural resources, a continent with vast, uncultivated land waiting to be transformed, a continent where 60% of the population is young, a demographic dividend that most developed economies can only dream of. And yet Africa remains a continent of mass poverty. That contradiction, Obi argued, is not destiny. It is a failure of leadership and a failure of global partnership. He then zeroed in on Nigeria specifically, drawing a comparison that should have silenced every MEP who had ever thought of Africa as a distant problem. Nigeria's population is more than half the entire population of the European Union. You are 450 million, he said. We are over 240 million. Nigeria alone is roughly a quarter of the land size of Europe. And yet, Europe's per capita income stands above $40,000. Nigeria's sits at barely 2.5% of that figure. Let that sink in. The same land, comparable populations, incomparable wealth. That gap, Obi told them, is not a Nigerian problem. It is a shared crisis waiting to happen. He made the geopolitical argument with equal force. The nearest continent to Africa is Europe. If Africa continues to collapse under the weight of poverty, insecurity, and misgovernance, the consequences will fall hardest on Europe. The migration pressure that already strains European politics is only a preview of what is coming if the root causes in Africa are not addressed. Conversely, if Africa turns around, Europe stands to gain more than any other region on Earth. A massive market, abundant resources, and a young, energetic workforce. On the issue of killings and insecurity, which had apparently been discussed in the parliamentary session, Obi did not shy away. He acknowledged the violence. He acknowledged the criminality, the kidnappings, the deaths, but he refused to reduce it to a simple religious or ethnic narrative. The real driver, he insisted, is mass poverty and mass illiteracy. Nigeria has over 100 million people living in multidimensional poverty. Millions of children who have never seen the inside of a classroom. When you build that kind of environment, you build a recruitment pipeline for every form of extremism and criminality imaginable. Solve the poverty, fund the education, and the violence begins to lose its oxygen. He closed with the strategic thesis that tied the entire address together. To develop Africa, you must develop Nigeria. Nigeria is 1 in 6 Africans. It is the engine of the continent. It is the country that, if turned around, will pull the rest of Africa with it. Peter Obi did not go to Brussels to beg. He went to reframe a conversation that the world has been having incorrectly for too long. Africa is not a charity case. It is the last frontier of global development, and Europe, whether it knows it yet or not, has a stake in what happens there.